Hello everyone and welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Josh, joined today by Ewan Patterson because we have some actually very good Star Wars news. Stop the presses, an EA single-player game has sold really well.
It proves they're wrong.
In a fashion, it kind of does a little bit, doesn't it? They've obviously been going down the multiplayer route and the microtransaction route and the games as service route for the past few years. Essentially, they've kind of wanted to make every game as monetizable as FIFA because that nets them loads and loads of money. But Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order has bucked that trend, and thankfully, people like us have actually responded to it and bought the game. So hopefully, this success will mean that we'll get a sequel and, fingers crossed, more single-player games from EA. But Ewan, can you please put the figures in perspective? Because I don't want to get ahead of myself too much.
Totally fair enough, because we were a little bit worried a few weeks ago because the UK sales chart for the middle of November kind of came out and they said that sales on Fallen Order were like 33% down on what Battlefront and Battlefront 2 achieved at launch. Obviously, this is probably going to increase the further we get towards Christmas. Obviously, they've chosen this release window because it's right before Rise of Skywalker and right before Christmas, which usually means more sales. But it was a little bit concerning to begin with because single-player experiences the whole narrative that EA have is that they're not as, kind of worthwhile as their multiplayer, as service games, which they can pump loads of microtransactions into, and people can just spaff away all their money on Ultimate Team and those original Battlefront crystals, which were, thank God, no longer in the game.
Thank God.
But yeah, by business-wide, they've actually come out and said that EA have achieved their fastest-selling digital launch for a Star Wars game ever, and it becomes its top-selling Star Wars title on PC in its initial launch window, which is fantastic, because that goes to show that, obviously, before launch, EA made a big deal about the fact that they were coming to Steam again. Obviously, there's EA Origin as well. We've got, I think they said it was on the Epic Store launcher as well, I think, maybe. But the fact that Star Wars had this big, wide release on PC has obviously helped its chances, but hopefully as well, it goes to show that Star Wars fans are interested in single-player games, kind of what they've been saying for the past, 10 years.
I don't want to say I told you so, but I'm kind of saying I told you so. And I think it is important that the report you were just talking about there is digital sales, because although, like you said, the UK report, which said that sales were actually down on Battlefront 2, was kind of worrying, the important thing to note is that as the years go on, more and more people are buying digitally anyway, and that UK sales report only takes into account physical sales. So it would make sense that if there is a shortfall, it will have been made up and then some by people buying digitally, because if you go and read any of the big publishers' sort of end of year financial reports, every single year, the digital market just increases and increases to the point where I think for some companies, the majority of their game sales come from digital, which means that, the old sort of
GameStop is shooketh.
Yeah, GameStop is shooketh, and the old barometers of gauging how well a game is doing sort of doesn't really work anymore. Like, it's not the same point, but Gears 5, for instance, we can't analyze how well that game did because a lot of people bought that on Games Pass. So there isn't just one way to buy games anymore, but even with that in mind, it sounds like it's done very well, and it's also important to note that EA didn't ever expect this to sell as well as Battlefront 2. Obviously, Battlefront is an established brand. The original game, the original reboot game, sold a ridiculous amount.
It was a ridiculous amount.
I think it was something like 335,000 copies, and that's in the UK alone.
Yes.
And then
334,000, and
that's
then
ridiculous.
Battlefront 2 had sequel 130,000 units. But okay, I think I got so it was 334,000 for the first game.
Yes.
130,000 for the second game, and then Fallen Order has sold 89,000 units in the UK as of a few weeks ago.
Which makes
Physical
sense.
Units.
And I hope, in my heart of hearts, this is enough for EA to sort of see the error of their ways and greenlight a sort of new, single-player Star Wars game, or at least continue with this franchise, because we've mentioned before, but this game was in development before Respawn was actually purchased by EA, which meant they had more leeway, but now they're fully under the umbrella. I wonder what they're going to get funneled into next. Ewan, are you more optimistic about the future than I am?
I'm pretty much, again, it's weird for me because at the same time, we've all agonized over, EA's kind of dismal showing for the Star Wars, for instance. They got the license, that is a gift. The Star Wars license is a gift, and EA went out of their way to actually acquire that license, and what they've done since with it, until Fallen Order came around, has been fairly, well, just kind of lackluster. I mean, we had the first Star Wars Battlefront, which I actually enjoyed as a game, but did it hold a candle to the original games? That's up for debate. Battlefront 2 obviously had that horrendous launch window, but has since kind of come back and clawed its way out of the pit that Darth Maul got chucked into to get some fancy new spider legs, and now it's crawling all over the most played charts, and it's a really, really good game. So I genuinely feel as though maybe Fallen Order's release, as well as Battlefront 2's, revival, kind of indicates that EA are turning a corner when it comes to Star Wars. Hopefully.
I want to believe this, but I do have one spanner that I just need to throw in the work, and that is this. Ultimate Team makes absolute gangbuster money, right? This single mode inside a popular game made EA 28% of its entire revenue came from Ultimate Team last year. That is ridiculous. Ultimate Team now makes more than EA actually gets from selling FIFA titles. So it makes more than the games it's attached with. It's absolutely ridiculous. And they are obviously looking at this, and they have even admitted sort of before that they want everything to be Ultimate Team, or to have an Ultimate Team. All the reports that we've got out of Kotaku about inside studios like BioWare indicates that, executives are going into meetings and they're going to BioWare, where's our Ultimate Team? And I don't want them to go to Respawn and say...
On Frostbite.
On Frostbite, yeah, absolutely, on Frostbite as well. Don't care about the problems, you're going to have to do it. So I don't want them to go to Respawn and say, again, where's our Ultimate Team?
Yeah.
Hopefully they can have their cake and eat it too, and realize because of the sort of negative backlash and the bad PR that they've got to a lot of these games as service as titles, not to even mention the Star Wars license in general. I hope they can. It sounds bad that a single player game is essentially throwing the fans a bone, but there's no reason why they can't, make an exception and still, get some money from the great sales that they're getting from the core, software sales without trying to put in monetizable aspects that they don't need, and will ultimately, like we saw from the dip from Battlefront 1 to Battlefront 2 sales, that ultimately just sours players, and that results in lower, a shortfall.
I completely agree, because, even though we talk about it's frustrating, because I definitely just want a good single-player game that doesn't have to worry about any of these bolted-on and monetizable aspects. Spider-Man PS4 was a great example. Obviously, Insomniac had the whole weight of Sony thrown behind them on that title, but it was a great return to the games of yore, where you had unlockables in the game. There was paid DLC, but it was just a chunk of DLC. There was no season pass malarkey. You just had the DLC, and you could play with it optionally after the game was complete. And Fallen Order does kind of follow in that game's footsteps in a few ways. You have the unlockable crates, all the customization in the game you get from just exploring the world, which again is great. I hope that Respawn wouldn't have to make compromises to return to a sequel, and EA are asking them, okay, so we've talked about the customization elements. Have you considered doing a microtransaction Jedi Robe DLC, for instance, maybe some Clone Wars Armor DLC? How about that? Because I really don't want that to happen. But at the same time, it's so easy to see how EA can maybe go, well, we'll let you do a Fallen Order sequel, but you have to hit XX targets for monetizable in-game purchases after release, which could be frustrating, but hopefully it wouldn't have to come to that.
It is sort of, a mark on where we are as an industry, or at least how pessimistic I've become as a player, that when I was playing Fallen Order, and I realized we had customization options, and none of them were locked behind, real-world money or anything. And, you can argue that the ponchos in the game aren't all that good. There are some garish, horrible ones in there, but the fact that I didn't have to pay for it, or they weren't locked behind grinding, and I was just finding them in the world, that was tragically so refreshing and so actually really rewarding and good. And hopefully that isn't an anomaly, and hopefully they don't, go into a sequel and EA is giving them, ifs and buts, because we have seen that in the past, like games like Dead Space 3, which is a great example. That game, was sort of retrofitted to be more mainstream or whatever, and it had a ridiculous target of about 5 million copies that I'm sure EA in their heart of hearts knew that game was never going to hit, just looking off the sales of the previous two titles. So they have a history of unrealistic expectations, and I wonder how that factors into the Star Wars license specifically, because it is a strange beast. And the rumors that we've had before in regards to this license is that EA is already kind of potentially getting a raw deal on it. They're not getting as much money as we might think they are. It's a bit of a burden, as opposed to, this sort of, flourishing money tree in a way.
I would be curious to see if maybe down the line that we can see EA actually, Respawn, acquiesce to EA in a certain way. I would quite like it if maybe in the next Fallen Order game, remember a Jedi Academy that had multiplayer?
Yes.
Maybe we'll get like a 4 Honor Star multiplayer, but with lightsabers involved. I think that could work, and you can get your cosmetic DLC in there anyway. I think, going forward, I really do hope that, EA can basically indulge their wildest fantasies on Ultimate Team and leave Star Wars to basically say, well, we'll have microtransactions, but will do it in not necessarily a way that encroaches on, you know, player enjoyment, whether that be pay-to-win models or whatever else, or, you know, cosmetics being locked behind, you know, paywalls, which thankfully Battlefront 2 doesn't have. You know, the only microtransactions in that game anymore are basically just you can buy X amount of currency to get a cosmetic. Everything else is free updates, and if Respawn could figure out a way to do that, but as long as everyone else can unlock these things in game, then that would be fine.
I wonder, right, and this is purely hypothetical speculation on my part, but can you remember when Battlefront 2, the controversy came out for that game? And there were so many rumors that apparently Bob Iger of Disney got on the old phone to EA and was like, "Hoi,
Such a gamer!
I'm such a gamer. What are you doing? You know what I mean? Stop doing this. It looks bad on us. It looks bad on Star Wars. It's not a good look. Please cut it out." So I wonder if there was any truth to those, and they have just sort of had to cut it out for Star Wars only, and specifically whilst they can continue to monetize the absolute crap out their other franchises. I have no idea.
Because we know we have at least one more Star Wars game coming before 2022. My money's on that being Battlefront 3 on the next gen, but, you know, obviously Battlefront 2 still has a roadmap, I think, going into next year. We've got the Rise of Skywalker DLC coming out in December, and then I think, presumably, given the Clone Wars focus of the last year, we'll probably get something for the Clone Wars Season 7 as well. But yeah, I think Battlefront 3 is probably a no-brainer for the next gen. Hopefully Respawn are able to continue doing work on Jedi Fallen Order. We had a podcast yesterday on, let's come out today actually, on the ending of Fallen Order and potentials for sequels. So you should go check that out for our thoughts on that. But yeah.
Fingers crossed, Ewan. Fingers crossed. It might actually be an exciting time to be a Star Wars video game fan. I have no idea. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you think this is a sign of good things to come? Are you looking forward to more single-player Star Wars games from EA and all that jazz? Are you looking forward to the Rise of Skywalker? I know I am. But either way, while you're down there, can you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't know, I've been Josh. You can find me on Twitter at JoshBroom with 2 O's. This has been Ewan. You can find him at
Ewan Ruins Things. Please send me death sticks.
And we'll see you soon.
Please send me death sticks.
You don't want any death
sticks. I need them.
You don't want any death sticks. You want to go home and rethink your life.
I want to go home and rethink my life.
You too. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.